I learned the truth about my daughter on the morning I was supposed to marry someone else, when I found a note under my windshield wiper that said, "Third pew on the left, yellow dress." Hey folks, Steve here. Welcome back to After Her Lies. If you're new, I tell stories I never thought I'd say out loud, things that kept me awake for 40 years. And before we dive in, I gotta say this. About 96 of you watching aren't subscribed. That hurts this old man's heart a little. If you like these stories, please hit subscribe, give this video a like so it moves around, and tell me what you think down in the comments. I read everyone. Alright, let's do it. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, where the winters smelled like wet wool and motor oil, and the summers buzzed with cicadas so loud you couldn't hear the radio if the window was down. I hired on at the GM plant right after high school Moraine Assembly second shift, metal shavings up my sleeves, union card tucked in my wallet behind a photo of my mother in her church hat. It wasn't glamorous, but those were good days. Solid days. Paycheck every Friday, bowling league on Saturdays, and a hand-me-down Chevy pickup that rattled like change in a jar. I met her at the Bluebird Diner in '79. The Bluebird sat off Route 741, a long silver tube with neon script that blinked "Eat here" even when the snow drifted to the windows. I was there for meatloaf after a brutal shift, hands still smelling like coolant. She slid a coffee in front of me and said, "It's on the house if you can tell me why coffee tastes like a cigarette in this place." "Nasty pot," I said. "You got to take the cap off and scrub that ring around the top." She laughed. "I like a man who talks like he knows." She had a name tag, Grace. Brown hair pulled into a low ponytail, tired eyes that still found a way to sparkle. I didn't drink coffee. I drank that one. She leaned on the counter and asked who I was when I wasn't wearing grease on my sleeves. I told her about the factory, my weekend band that never stayed on key, and my dad's old baseball glove I still kept in the closet. She told me she was going to nursing school and working nights to keep up with the bills. We talked through her smoke break. It felt easy. The first lie was small. Isn't that how it always starts? She said she lived with a roommate named Lynn, but when I drove her home the first time, she asked me to drop her at the Sunrise Motel by the highway. "Just for now," she said, pushing hair behind her ear. "Lynn's boyfriend is a creep. I need a week or two until it blows over." I believed her because that's what you do when your heart's still brand new. She became the sun on my calendar. We did everything small-town couples do, fairs and football games, slow drives on country roads where the radio static was worse than the songs. I bought her a jacket at Reich's department store, the kind with the fake fur collar that looked warm even when it was August. She pretended to scold me for spending money and then wore it every night. I took her to meet my dad, who shook her hand and said, "Any girl who can fold a pie crust tight is all right with me." She rolled dough with my mother in our tiny kitchen while I pretended not to watch how they laughed the same way, head back, hand to mouth, almost a song. The second lie was bigger. She wasn't in nursing school. I figured that out when I saw her in a CVS uniform cap on a Tuesday afternoon, and she closed her eyes like she'd been caught stealing a cookie. "I wanted to look better to you," she said later, knee to knee with me in my truck. "I wanted to be the kind of woman your mother wouldn't have to pretend to like." "My mother doesn't pretend," I said. It was true and not true at the same time. Mom liked people on credit until they proved her wrong, and Grace, if that was her name, had only paid her first installment. "You don't have to be anything but you." She kissed me soft, the kind of kiss that thatched itself into your ribs and stayed. "You're a good man, Steve," she whispered. "I don't know what to do with that." The third lie I didn't find for a while, and by the time I did, it had grown roots into my future. There was a Wednesday night in November, almost Thanksgiving, when the cold felt metallic, like you could taste it. I got off shift, drove by the Bluebird, and her boss said she'd clocked out early. The Sunrise Motel lights were off in her unit. A bad feeling crawled up my spine, the kind my dad always said to listen to. I parked across the street and waited with the engine off, breath fogging the windshield. Around 11, I saw her step out of a Cadillac I didn't recognize. She hugged the driver too long, and he handed her an envelope. She turned it over in her hands, glanced around, and walked toward the stairs with her head down. When she reached the landing, I honked once, not loud, just enough to say I was there. Her face went white under the yellow light. We stared at each other from across the road like two people who had just found out language was a trick. "That's my brother," she said when she slid into my truck. "I was going to tell you. You said you didn't have family close." "Half-brother," she said. It's complicated." "Is your name even Grace?" The way she flinched told me before her mouth did. "Laura," she said. "It's Laura Jean Carter. Grace is my middle name." Some things are so simple they feel like a punch. My first thought was that every minute I'd spent with her had to be measured again, like someone tilted the scale and we were all going to court. My second thought, louder, was I didn't want to lose her. "Who's the guy?" "His name is Darren," she said, and she braced for how that sounded. "The envelope is money. I owed him. I made some bad choices last year, and I've been trying not to drown. When my dad was dying years later, he told me there are two kinds of men, the ones who need to be right and the ones who need to be kind. That night, I was too young to know which one I would be. I only knew I wanted to show her I wasn't going to leave her standing in the cold. So I pulled her hand into mine and said, "Okay." It was a ragged okay, not pretty, but it was the best I had. The winter we fell in love kept on like it had somewhere to be. We cut a tree too big for my living room and pretended it wasn't going to be a fire hazard. We burned cinnamon rolls, laughed the smoke out the window, and drank milk from the carton like teenagers. She slept over and left early, always early, like the morning could catch her if it tried hard enough. Then February came with a shriek. I got home one night to find my apartment door cracked. Inside, the place was turned over like somebody had been looking for a secret I didn't have. Drawers dumped, couch cushions slit, my guitar smashed. There were muddy shoe prints in the hallway, 2 sets, one dragging a little like the person had a knee that nagged him when it iced. And on the kitchen table, a Polaroid. Laura, eyes big as lakes, hands tied with a scarf I recognized as mine, a newspaper opened beside her with today's date. The note said, "Mind your own." I felt something in me go cold and stay that way. I called the police. They came slow, took pictures, wrote numbers in dull pencils, asked if I had enemies. I said I worked at a car factory and played bad covers of Tom Petty. They swallowed their smirks and told me to call if anyone came back. After they left, I drove to the Bluebird. She wasn't there. I drove to the Sunrise. Her door was open. Emptiness has a sound air going where it shouldn't. The bed was stripped. The closet was a mouth of wire hangers. The nightstand had a ring of coffee where she'd set her cup every morning at 6:15. Under that cup ring sat a folded paper. I lied. "Don't look for me." I don't know how long I sat on the linoleum. The world narrowed to 2 sentences that moved like a snake through everything I thought was solid. I wanted to kick the door off its hinges, to drive until the highway shook apart, to go to every Darren in Montgomery County and pull him through his doorway by his collar. Instead, I went home to the wreck of my apartment and swept glass into a dustpan until the broom handle dug blisters into my palms. The thing about heartbreak is, it's not an explosion. It's a slow leak. You wake up and think the worst is over, and then you go to pour coffee and remember she took the only mug you liked. You hear a song at the gas station and stand with the nozzle in your hand, forgetting you're filling the tank until gasoline spills down your boot. Your mother squeezes your shoulder at church, and you fold like a card table. Life marched on. My sister had a baby. The plant switched foreman. My band got a gig at the VFW every 3rd Friday, and the absence of Laura Jean Carter throbbed under all of it. Months turned into a year. People said what people say. She wasn't right for you. Better to find out now. God closed a door, Steve. I nodded so they could feel helpful. Then, because I didn't know what else to do, I got engaged to a woman who deserved better than the leftover heart I handed her. Her name was Janet. Third-grade teacher. The kind of steady that makes you feel like a person again. We met at the laundromat because she rescued my sock from behind a dryer and handed it to me with a smile, like she knew where all the lost things go. We ate at Pizza Hut on Fridays and saved for a couch we never owned because of what I'm about to tell you. On the morning we were supposed to get married in April of '87, I walked out to my Chevy in my shirt sleeves to pick up my father from his place. The frost on the windshield had melted into a thin film, and there, tucked under the wiper, was a note, third pew on the left, yellow dress. I stood in the parking lot while an April breeze pushed grit across the asphalt, and I read that line again and again until the words felt like part of the truck. I could have thrown it away. That would have been the clean thing. But I knew that handwriting. It was careful and slanted, like the letters were leaning into a wind. Laura. Grace. Whatever her name was, she had reached through the years and put her hand on my throat. I told myself I would go to the church, look. And if it was a trick, I'd come back to the vestibule, straighten my tie, and do the thing I'd promised to do. The church smelled like lemon oil and lilies. People moved like bees' ushers, cousins, my mother humming. I slid into a back pew and scanned the sanctuary. Third pew on the left, near the aisle, was a little girl with a yellow dress and white knee socks, swinging her feet like a metronome. She had dark hair and a cowlick that wouldn't sit down. When she turned to whisper in the ear of the woman beside her, I saw her face. I saw my mother's eyes. My mother, who died when I was 19, had that exact shade, the green that only came with sunlight through stained glass. The woman with the girl had a church bulletin and a stiff expression like she was there out of duty. And behind them, 2 rows back, stood Laura. Older, pale, a tremor in the hand she used to tuck hair behind her ear. I didn't remember crossing the aisle, but suddenly I was beside her in that narrow passage, and she was looking at me like a person who has trained themselves not to cry and is about to fail. "Don't ruin her day," she whispered. "It isn't what you think." "What is it?" I said, but it came out like a plea. "Not here," she said. "Meet me at Delco Park by the pond after you make your decision." My decision. The words were a slap and a mercy. I looked one more time at the girl in the yellow dress. She turned her head quickly, and for a second her eyes met mine. She smiled the way kids do when they catch a dog watching them, shy and pleased. It was a small smile. I felt my chest collapse around it. I walked back down the aisle like a man who'd forgotten why he had walked anywhere. I found my father in the vestibule, hands in his pockets, looking like a barn in Sunday clothes. He knew me too well. He put a hand on my shoulder. "Son," he said. "I can't do it," I said. He closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. "I'll tell your mother. You tell Janet." Janet was in the bridal room with her sister pinning veils to a foam head. When I told her, she sat on the floor very carefully, like she was lowering herself into cold water. "Is it her?" she said. "The one you won't talk about?" "Yes," I said, because lying would have been another kind of cruelty. "I hope," she said finally, voice scraping, "that whatever this is leads you somewhere that doesn't keep eating you." I loved her for that sentence for the rest of my life. Delco Park at noon on a Saturday is joggers and fathers' sons with fishing rods and geese that don't respect personal space. I sat on a damp bench and watched ripples where an old man had just thrown breadcrumbs. Laura came around the bend in a denim jacket and sunglasses that couldn't hide anything. Up close I saw scars I didn't know, little white lines at her hairline, a thin slash on her wrist. Life had written on her while I wasn't looking. "Her name is Maggie," she said before I could open my mouth. "Margaret Ann. She likes yellow and peanut butter and baseball, because of course she does. I closed my eyes and let the name walk around my head. Is she? She's yours, she said. She said it fast, like ripping off a bandage she'd worn for years. I told you I wasn't pregnant because I thought if you stayed near me, you'd get hurt. I was in deep, Steve. Deeper than I understood. Darren wasn't just a half-brother. He was the kind of person who thinks people are furniture. He used me to move things, money, pills. When I said no, he broke the guitar you bought me and left that picture in your kitchen. When I left town, I did it because he told me if I didn't, he'd make you disappear in a way that made sense to no one. You could have told me, I said, but it sounded small. You were 26 and brave in all the wrong places. You would have walked into a storm with your head up. She looked past me at the water. I lied to you to save you. I'm not asking you to like that. I thought of the Polaroid on my kitchen table and the muddy footprints and the way she'd left that motel room like a stage after the audience has gone. I thought about all the nights I'd hated her in that quiet way that makes you sick from the inside out. And I thought of the girl in the third pew with my mother's eyes, swinging her feet. Who is she with? I asked. That woman in the pew. Her aunt, she said. My cousin June. I got away. I went to Indiana, then down to Kentucky for a while. I had Maggie, and it was like someone handed me a map for the first time. I came back last year because Darren went to prison on something stupid, tax evasion, I think. He'll be out, but I needed to be near a school where she could be safe. She doesn't know her father is you. I told her daddy was a kind man who played guitar and smelled like motor oil. I told her he loved baseball and once brought me a jacket I wore even when it was too hot. She believes in that man. I didn't want to ruin your wedding. I just wanted you to know you weren't crazy. The love was real. The baby was real. I wanted you to see her one time in the light. We sat there for a long time while kids yelled in the distance and a goose hissed at my shoe like I'd trespassed. She told me she'd gotten clean, that she worked at a grocery but told them she had to leave by 3 every day because Maggie's bus came at 3:15 and she wanted to be the first face the little girl saw. She told me she had a box of stuff she'd saved, movie ticket stubs, my old band flyers, a photo of us in front of a Christmas tree where I was making a face like I'd swallowed a nut hole. She told me June's husband, a big soft man with a landscaping business, had offered to adopt Maggie if everything lined up. But she couldn't decide because something in her was a brick when it came to giving up. What do you want me to do? I asked. I want you to live, she said. I want you to stop bleeding over every person you meet because of me. Then she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a Polaroid. New this time. Maggie holding a wiffle bat, mouth open mid-shout, hair flying. This is for you, she said. Put it somewhere only you know. If someday it's safe and if you want, find us. If someday she wants to find you, I will tell her the truth. But today has to be mine. I didn't marry Janet. There are clean ways to set a thing down, and there are messy ways. Mine was more like tripping in public and then trying to pretend I meant to do it. She went to stay with her sister for a week and came back for her things with her shoulders squared like she'd read a book about strength and decided to play the lead. I hugged her and tried to apologize for something that couldn't be wrapped in words, and she rested her head on my chest for maybe 3 seconds and then stepped back and left. Years later, we ran into each other at the grocery. She had 2 boys climbing the buggy and a laugh line she'd earned. She introduced me to her husband, a man with kind eyes, and afterward I sat in my truck and thanked to God I didn't understand for giving her the life she'd wanted. Life took me south. The plant cut shifts, then cut me, and I went to Louisville to work at a parts warehouse my cousin ran. I met my best friend there, a guy named Ben who taught me how to make ribs and how to know when you're lying to yourself. We started playing music on porches, then in bars, Then at a little place called the Green Lights, where people came in for beer and stayed for whatever it was my voice did when I sang about women who wore the truth like a coat they didn't own. I kept Laura and Maggie in a part of me I didn't let anyone touch. The picture stayed in my sock drawer, wrapped in an old bandana. Sometimes I'd take it out at night and look at her eyes until the morning felt less dangerous. Time, if you let it, smooths out even the sharpest edges. Not all the way, but enough that you can walk barefoot again. In 2004, my father got sick and then died in a month so fast it felt like a trick. I went home to Dayton to pack up his house, mow the lawn one last time, and sit with his boots by the back door like they might get up and go without him. The funeral was at the same church where I almost made a different life. They sang the same hymns, the same lemon oil and lilies. After the service, while people were taking potato salad into the basement, a young woman stood awkwardly by the door, wringing the strap of her purse. "Mr. Walker," she said. I turned, bracing for some bill I'd forgotten, and then I saw it. The eyes. My mother's eyes, but fixed on me from a face that had learned to carry itself without asking permission. She was holding a casserole dish with foil that wrinkled like a bad haircut. "Maggie?" I said, before my head had a chance to catch up with my mouth. Her smile was my mother's smile too. "Hi," she said, breathless, as if she'd run there from somewhere far. "I didn't know if I should come. I heard about your dad from Mrs. Browning at the grocery. Mom Laura. She wanted to be here, but she's not well." My heart did that thing again, the collapse. "What do you mean, not well?" "Breast cancer," she said, and then she cleared her throat like she was mad at herself for the way the words came out. "It's been a couple years. We thought she beat it. It came back. She told me about you when I was 12. She said you played guitar and liked your steaks too done, and that you once got in a fist fight with a rooster at a roadside petting zoo." She laughed, cried, wiped it in one motion. "She said you didn't know about me at first because she was trying to keep you alive. She said if I ever wanted to meet you, she would help me, but it had to be my call. I made the call." We went to the cemetery and sat on the hood of my truck like teenagers, the funeral procession long gone, and we talked until the light changed color. She told me she liked baseball because her mom told her her father did, and then she discovered on her own that there's nothing as good as the heavy quiet between pitches. She liked yellow for no reason except that it felt like sunlight you could wear. She was taking classes at the community college and wanted to be a social worker because she'd spent too many afternoons sitting in chairs in offices with those little fountains that sound like they need to pee. "I want to be the person my mum didn't have," she said, and it was the first time I realized a sentence could both break you and fix you. We started slow, like you should with live wires. Coffee at a crowded place so she could leave if she needed to. A ball game we didn't talk through. She came to hear me sing and told me my voice sounded like an old screen door squeaky, and exactly right. I drove up more to Dayton and helped her move apartments. I met June, who gave me the kind of hug that told me she'd been hugging our side of the story for years so it wouldn't blow away. I met June's husband, Carl, who told me if I ever needed mulch, I was now family rates. The first time I saw Laura again after the park was in a beige room at Kettering Medical, IV stand like a skinny tree, her hair a scarf she wore with more style than I'd ever had. She was thinner, but her eyes were the same, and when she smiled, I saw the girl from the Bluebird Diner hiding in there, tapping ash into a saucer. She made me promise not to say brave in that voice people use, the one that makes you into a statue. We talked like old neighbors, carefully, and then we talked like people who had been thrown into the same foxhole and made it out. She told me she'd married a man named Ken for 3 years, a mechanic who could fix anything but a drinking problem. He was kind sober, mean when he wasn't. He signed the papers without a fight when she told him Maggie needed peace, and then he died in a pileup on I-70 a year later, which felt like the kind of terrible ending you don't put in a story, because it's too neat for how messy it felt. "Do you hate me?" she asked one afternoon when the room was quiet and the nurse had turned down the lights so the machines could nap. "I hate that we were young and dumb and not supernatural," I said. "I hate that you had to choose between bad and worse. I hate that I let the hurt turn me into a man who couldn't love a good woman the right way." "But you? Hate's the wrong size for you." She nodded like that answer cost something, but not everything. "Darren's out," she said almost conversationally, like she was remarking on the weather. "He works at a garage in Troy. He sends birthday cards to Maggie with $10 and a note that says, 'Be good.' He looks like a man who lost the thing he thought he owned. Do I need to?" "No," she said. "You need to be the man in the story I told her." Being Maggie's father at almost 50 felt like walking into a movie halfway through and trying to play a part with no script. I asked dumb questions. I bought her terrible presents at first, tools and records and a toaster shaped like a baseball. But I showed up when she said come, and I shut up when she said stop. And slowly, carefully, like Thor, we built something that didn't need permission. The first time she called me Dad, we were sitting in a Walmart parking lot because her car battery was dead, and I had that time-tested cure for all automotive problems, a jump and a prayer. She said it like she was testing a bridge. Dad. It held. We both cried and tried to hide it by pretending air got in our eyes. Here's a twist you're not expecting because I sure didn't. The boy who'd been hit in that hit and run Laura carried like a brick. He lived. His name was Daniel. I'd heard his mother's name for years in town, Mrs. Perez, who taught math and baked pies that made grown men propose. One night in 2006, I was walking out of a Kroger with a bag of milk and bread and day-old donuts, because I am who I am, and I heard someone say, "Mr. Walker." I turned, a tall man in scrubs. He had the tired grace of a person who has done too many good deeds in a day to keep track. "You don't know me," he said, "but I know you. I'm Daniel Perez. My mom used to say your name in our kitchen when she thought I was asleep. I think she needed to hate someone is what I think. She said you were tied up in it somehow. I used to plan how to find you. Then I got bored with being mad." The world bent. "How are you, son?" I said, and I meant it in all the ways. He grinned and lifted his scrubs. There was a scar like a zipper along his right hip. "I'm a nurse," he said. "I run marathons. I married a woman who can beat me at chess and arm wrestling. I grew up. That's how I am." He cocked his head. "Is it true what I heard? About a daughter? Is her name Maggie?" "Yes," I said, a little wary. She's good." "You tell her," he said, "that I'm not a ghost. I'm a person who got hurt and then healed in most of the ways." He stuck out his hand. "Also, my car won't start. Would a guy like you have jumper cables?" We laughed so hard we scared a seagull into dropping a French fry. I jumped his car, and we stood there like old pals while wind blew plastic bags into the fence by the retention pond. The next Sunday he came to a family cookout at June's, and I watched Laura shake hands with the boy whose name had haunted years she could have used for something else. They sat at the card table and talked like the two bravest people I've ever known. And when they hugged, I felt a knot I didn't realize I still had in me come loose and float up like a balloon. I'm not going to tell you that everything ended in sunshine. That's not how life works for us mortals. Laura died the next spring. At home, hospice brought a bed and a calm and women who knew how to tuck sheets, so even death seemed less rude. She asked me to play for her, quietly, so I did. I sang the songs I wrote about her, and the ones I wrote in shame and never played, and the old hymns my mother hummed over dishes. Maggie fell asleep in a chair with her face pressed into her forearm like a kid in school. June made coffee, no one drank. I held Laura's hand and watched the tide go out, slow and stubborn. When it was over, I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Okay." That okay finally felt like the one I'd meant to say on the night I failed to say it right. At the graveside, Maggie squeezed my fingers until they hurt. "She's not a liar," she said, suddenly furious at the dirt and the polite pastor and anyone who had ever shortened an answer because it made them more comfortable. "She's not. She broke into a ragged laugh that scared a bird out of the cedar tree. She just loved me sideways." "She loved you," I said. "Sideways, upside down, through walls. She loved you the way houses love the people who live in them." "Do you ever stop being mad at someone for leaving?" she asked. "You learn to be mad at death and not at the person," I said. "You learn death is a thief, and thieves don't deserve your best anger." We stood in the wind and let the day crease around us. If you're still with me after all that, you might be wondering why I called this channel After Her Lies. I did it because that's how the story looked from where I stood for a long time. But the older I get, the more I think the title is a joke God lets me keep in my pocket. The lies were real. I won't pretend they weren't. She lied about her name, her job, her brother, my daughter. But the reason is the part I didn't know how to say when I was young. The lies were an attempt, clumsy and costly, to build a wall around the people she loved when she didn't have bricks. After her lies, I learned that truth and kindness are not enemies, that being right can be a way to avoid being human, that mercy is not a get-out-of-jail-free card, but a way to say, "I see your scars, and I don't mistake them for your face." I run this channel because there are men like me who think their story has to be the last word they heard someone else say about them. There are women like Laura who think the worst thing they've done is the only thing anyone will ever see. There are daughters like Maggie who carry names and secrets and find a way to turn them into jobs that help other people climb out of chairs in offices with little fountains. If I tell this story right, maybe someone at a kitchen table will say, "I thought I was the only one." And then they'll breathe. Maggie's 36 now. She's got a husband named Jonah who laughs too loud, and a little boy who calls me Poppy and loves trucks the way a cat loves boxes. She sends me pictures of sunsets like she's hoarding the sky. And sometimes when I play music on Friday nights at a VFW 2 towns over, I see a girl in the back with dark hair and my mother's eyes swinging her feet, and I play the song a little softer. I kept that Polaroid, the one of Maggie with the wiffle bat, even after I had 100 new photos. It's still in my sock drawer, wrapped in the same bandana, a relic of a time when proof was a thing you could hold instead of a story you trusted. We never saw Darren again. He stopped sending the $10 bills when Maggie graduated high school and moved states. June says he's somewhere out west, peddling used cars and new regrets. Sometimes I wonder what it would feel like to forgive him. Then I think maybe that feeling is none of my business. Maybe forgiveness, like love, is the kind of thing you can only do for your own soul and then step aside. Janet and I send each other Christmas cards. She writes the news in tiny print and always asks after Maggie in a way that doesn't poke. I told her once that her kindness saved me more times than the songs did. She said everybody should get to be a soft place once. You know, I realized something late. Back when Laura told me she didn't want to ruin my wedding, I thought she meant my day. The tux, the photos, the cake my mother would have cut with her teeth. But what she meant was she didn't want to use me as a rescue boat. She wanted me to choose my life with eyes open, not because a ghost showed up and dragged me off. I didn't marry Janet because I didn't love her the way she deserved, not because Laura sent me a note. The note woke me up. It didn't drive the car. That distinction matters. If you're sitting there right now with a note under your wiper you haven't looked at yet, I can't tell you what to do. I wouldn't if I could. But I can tell you this. The person you are while you decide that person matters more than the decision itself. Be kind. Be honest. Don't make your fear the boss of your love, and for the love of all things holy, don't let pride make your mouth say no when your heart is trying to say yes. I measure my life now by small quiets. Sunday morning coffee, the sound of a baseball game on a radio that can't quite keep the station. The way my grandson quizzes me about whether dinosaurs liked pancakes. The way my hands still remember where to go on a guitar neck when I don't rush them. The way grief visits like an old friend who takes off their shoes at the door. The way that little yellow dress looked that morning, like sunshine had sat down in church and decided to behave for an hour. That's the story I promised at the top. If you made it to the end, thank you for letting me be a person here, not just a voice on your phone. Do me a favor? If the story meant something to you, hit that subscribe button. It would mean the world to me, really. 96% of you watching aren't subscribed, and I'm not getting any younger. Give this a like so the algorithm doesn't hide it in a basement, and tell me your story in the comments. Tell me about the love you lost and the life you found after. I'll be there, listening, same as always. I'm Steve, and this is After Her Lies. Take care of each other.